So the second step, stakeholder engagement. Well, firstly, who or what is a stakeholder? Well, a stakeholder are individuals or groups that can influence the proposal, are affected by the proposal, or otherwise have an interest in the proposal. And one of the things to bear in mind with a business case that's a little bit different to when we're thinking about this from a project perspective is that a key part within here is who are the individuals that are going to be involved in the approval of the case as well as we work through those. Um, Now, what do we want to do as we work through with our stakeholder engagement, and what are we trying to achieve? Well, firstly, as we just touched on with the case for change and the problem definition, is to make sure that we understand the problem definition. We've engaged with the right stakeholders so that we understand the cause of the problem, and we've also maybe trying to shape some different alternatives from there. We need to make sure that the proposal is reflective of stakeholder needs and concerns, and in some cases, their expectations are managed accordingly. We need to gather information from stakeholders to inform those options, and it also helps guide us in terms of the respective prioritization of each of those options as we work through. Now, when we engage with stakeholders, they're also very good and often very willing to share with us the risks that are involved in each of our options or with the proposals that we're making. And this is a great way of getting some input around those risks so that we can appropriately try to manage them or make informed decisions about them. We also need to understand from our stakeholders and to work with our stakeholders to improve change management outcomes. And we can do this by creating and maintaining their support for the proposal. And finally, we want to understand key decision makers' priorities through our engagement. And this comes back to the point of who is going to be approving our business case. It's actually going to be really difficult to get anyone on board if we feel like they haven't been listened to throughout the case or the proposal. So we've got to understand their perceptions, their views. And if we don't come to that same conclusion, we've got to be able to make sure that we can articulate why that is. So understanding their priorities and their views is really important in guiding the development of our case. Now, one of the challenges with our stakeholder engagement is that we very often don't get enough time to be able to engage as fully as we'd like to. So what we need to do is try to prioritize how we're going to make that work. And a simple way that we can do that is by using a simple stakeholder prioritization matrix or simple stakeholder mapping. And what we're doing here in this particular example is we're looking at the power of our stakeholders. So who has the authority, who has the influence that can actually change what we're going to be doing in the sense. So usually we've got a more senior executive within the organization, or it might be a regulatory authority that we've got to comply with. But if we don't comply or we don't meet our senior executive's views, then we're going to need to change to be able to accommodate that. So they have high power within that sense. And then on the other axes, we're looking at how much is somebody affected by our particular proposal. And this means if somebody's affected highly in that sense, then they'll move over to that right side of the quadrant within here. And what this is doing is it's trying to identify more our key stakeholders in the sense. And this, I've got a little bit careful. Generally, anyone who has high power through this process is a pretty key stakeholder. Um, but we've also got to be careful those that are affected highly in terms of what we're proposing as well will also be key from a business case solution. And that might be that individually they don't have enough power, so they could be that consult with quadrant where they've got low power, but they're affected quite highly. But we need to make sure we appropriately consult with them so we design the appropriate solutions or we come away with the appropriate options to best solve the problem that we're trying to solve. So we've got to make sure with those stakeholders, they're key in the implementation of the case, we understand their concerns. This becomes really critical as part of the change management. To discuss with there is this is where high power, high interest, and they are very important. We need to make sure that they're going to support our decisions. And when we've got stakeholders with high power and they're affected not as much, they could be really important. They could be good, strong advocates for the for our particular proposal. So we want to make sure that they're furnished with the right information in the sense there. So what we're doing without these quadrants is really trying to make sure that we appropriately engage with each of these parties, and we get the best value out of that engagement, and therefore the best value out of our minimum amount of time that we've got to try to put to all of this.